You ever stop and think about why your job is set up the way it is? I mean, who came up with managers and departments and all those performance reviews? Well, today we're going to take a trip back in time, a journey through the history of management to find out exactly that. We're going to uncover the hidden logic behind how we work, from the super rigid, almost clockwork-like factory floor to the flexible, collaborative teams we see today. All right, let's dive.
Okay, so it all kicks off right here, in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, you've got these gigantic factories popping up, with incredibly complex machines and literally thousands of people all working under one roof. And as you can imagine, it was pure chaos. It was messy, it was inefficient, and it created this totally new problem that no one had ever faced before. How on earth do you organize all of this?
And that, right there, is the big question. It's the question that's driven more than 100 years of thinking and debating. Is there one single, perfect, best way to manage people to get the most out of them? Honestly, this one question is what starts our whole story.
So, the very first real answer to that question didn't come from philosophers or kings, it came from engineers. They looked at that chaotic factory floor, and they didn't see people, they saw a system, a machine that was broken and could be fixed, could be optimized. And this way of thinking gave birth to our first major theory, scientific management.
The core idea here was pretty revolutionary back then. It was basically, let's treat work like a science. Forget about tradition, forget about rules of thumb, or just how we've always done it. Instead, let's use data, observation, and cold hard logic to find the single most efficient way to do every single task. And the goal? Well, it was all about maximum productivity.
And the guy at the absolute center of this whole movement was Frederick W. Taylor. He was a mechanical engineer, and he was completely obsessed with getting rid of waste. I mean, this guy would literally stand in a factory with a stopwatch and break down every single motion a worker made just to find what he called the one best way to do any job.
Taylor eventually boiled his whole method down to these 4 principles. And this is the part that really flipped the world of work on its head. See, before Taylor, workers mostly figured out how to do their own jobs. But Taylor said nope. He argued that management's job was to be the brain, to scientifically design the work. And the worker's job? Well, their job was just to be the hands and execute that design perfectly, no questions asked.
Now, Taylor's stopwatch obsession really inspired a lot of people, including this couple, Frank and Lillian Gilbert. They loved his passion for efficiency, but they asked a slightly different, and maybe more humane question. What if the best way was also the easiest way for the worker? So while Taylor was all about saving time, the Gilberts were focused on saving motion. They basically pioneered ergonomics, trying to make work not just faster, but way less exhausting.
Okay, so scientific management was all about optimizing the individual task. But what about the entire company? As these businesses grew into huge, sprawling enterprises, a totally new problem came up. How do you manage the managers? And this led to our next big idea, bureaucratic management.
The answer, they decided, was bureaucracy. Now I know, that word has a really bad rap today, right? You think of red tape, endless forms, just soul-crushing boredom. But back then, it was actually a pretty radical solution for creating order and fairness and consistency in these massive, chaotic organizations. The main thinker here was a guy named Max Weber. He looked around and saw that most businesses were run based on who you were related to or who your friends were. Nepotism, basically. His big idea was to replace who you know with what you know. He pushed for a system with clear rules and a formal hierarchy where you got promoted because you were good at your job, not because you were the boss's nephew.
Right around the same time, a French engineer, Henri Fayol, was busy creating a practical blueprint for what managers should actually do. You could say that while Weber was the theorist, Fayol was the architect. He was a huge believer that management wasn't some gift you were born with, but a real skill that could actually be taught and learned.
And here they are, his big 5 duties: planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. This became the fundamental job description for a manager. And honestly, if you work in any company today, I guarantee you've seen these principles in action, even 100 years later.
So by the early 20th century, it kind of seemed like they had it all figured out. Taylor had made the work super efficient. Weber and Fayol had made the whole organization orderly and predictable. But in their search for this perfect machine-like system, they'd started treating people like they were just cogs in that machine. Did they forget about the human element? Well, that huge oversight sparked a kind of backlash, a revolution in thinking that put people, not processes, back at the center of everything. And this was the rise of humanistic management.
One of the key pioneers here was Mary Parker Follett. She's often called the mother of modern management, and her ideas were so far ahead of her time, it's incredible. She completely rejected this idea of a constant battle between workers and managers. Instead, she talked about integration, collaboration, power sharing, all this stuff that sounds super modern, but she was saying it back in the 1920s.
And then came this landmark series of experiments at the Hawthorne Works factory, led by Elton Mayo. So these researchers went in, and they started messing with everything. The lighting, the rest breaks, the pay, all trying to find the perfect conditions for productivity. But something really strange happened. No matter what they did, whether they made conditions better or even worse, productivity just kept going up. The mind-blowing discovery was that the workers weren't responding to the physical changes. They were responding to the attention. For the very first time, somebody was asking for their opinion, and just feeling valued was enough to make them work harder.
This massive shift in thinking was captured perfectly by a guy named Douglas McGregor and his Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X, that's the old-school scientific management view. People are lazy, they hate work, and you have to control them. But Theory Y is the total opposite, the new human relations view. People actually enjoy work, they're self-motivated, and they want responsibility. And what McGregor argued is that a manager's assumptions about their people end up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So, all this history, where does it leave us today? Well, the world has just gotten way too complex for any one single theory to work everywhere. Modern management isn't about finding that one right answer anymore. It's really about having a whole toolkit of different approaches you can use. I mean, just think about everything a modern manager has to juggle. You've got the insane pace of technology, global competition coming from everywhere, incredibly diverse workforces, and constantly shifting social expectations. Those rigid, top-down structures from the old days, they're just too slow, too brittle to survive in this new world. So one of the modern ways to think about this is to stop seeing the company as a machine and start seeing it more like an ecosystem, right? It's this interconnected web of suppliers, employees, customers. They're all influencing each other. And the whole system is reacting to this external environment of competitors and new laws. A change in one little part can send ripples through the entire thing. And all of that leads us to what is probably the most dominant idea in management today, the contingency approach. It's the ultimate takedown of Taylor's One Best Way. It basically says the right way to manage depends entirely on the situation. So the modern manager's job isn't to be a master of one system. It's to be a great diagnostician, someone who can look at a problem, analyze the situation, and pull the right tool out of the kit for that specific job. So if there's one big takeaway from all this, it's this. The entire story of management has been a journey away from that search for a single universal solution. We've gone from chasing the one best way to building this diverse toolkit and realizing that the real skill is knowing which tool to use and exactly when to use it. And that brings us right up to the future. With things like AI, remote work, and huge generational shifts completely transforming our jobs all over again, well, the story of management is definitely not over. So what do you think is next? What's going to be the next big theory that changes how we all work?